My parents raised us to snitch for love and turned my siblings into spies. The night I saw what they did to my little sister, I took her and never looked back. 6 months later, they got arrested, trying to foster more kids. Growing up, my parents only rewarded me and my siblings for one thing: telling on each other. I grew up as the middle child of 4 siblings, the type to be forgotten. It was like I could always see what everyone else was blind to. Because even though my parents thought they had us in control, I was the one they were wrong about. You see, my older brother Nate would do anything for Daddy's love. One time when me and him were alone in my room together, I accidentally spilled a drop of cranberry juice on the beige carpet. I felt like a deer in headlights. Immediately, I took off my t-shirt, spit on it, and vigorously rubbed it into the material. Nate was already walking down the stairs by the time he realized what was going on. Neil just spilled his juice all over the floor upstairs. He's so clumsy. I didn't hear anything else being said, just the unmistakable sound of my dad's footsteps, walking over to the nearest drawer and grabbing what sounded like the black leather whip. I didn't do anything. Just lay on my front side on my bed, with a pillow in my mouth to stop myself from screaming too loudly. 1, 2, 3. I didn't get dinner that night. And while I spent the next few hours crying into my bed sheets, I could hear Nate downstairs being treated like a king for telling on me. "You are so mature, my handsome boy," my mom said, her voice practically beaming through the house. "I'm so proud of you," our dad bellowed. At the time, I was just 4 years old, while Nate was 6. That same year, our younger twin sisters were born, and that's how I ended up being raised by 5 surveillance cameras. My parents gave them the same treatment they gave me and Nate. They acted like the world's greatest parents until their 3rd birthday. And from there, they'd withhold all affection from them. No nice words, no hugs, nothing. Unless they did one thing: start telling on each other. By the time I was 10, I had been wailed on more times than I can count. Not cleaning my room properly, leaving leftover crumbs on my plate, crying too loudly, wearing clothes that showed any indication of my injuries. Meanwhile, my siblings only got it once or twice a year, because from all the punishment, I learned one thing. It was the last thing I wanted to inflict on my siblings. So even when I caught them doing things, I'd never tell on them. Heck, sometimes I'd even take the blame for it. And in some ways, it paid off. Like Nate and the twins always felt safest around me. But none of them returned the favor. Not once, because there was something they loved more than me. And that was our parents. Over time, it was clear that I was getting the most amount of punishment. But instead of attributing that to my kindness towards them, or the fact I was simply just a good person, everyone started seeing me as the troublemaker. Suddenly, nothing I did was ever enough. If I snored too loudly and annoyed one of my siblings, my mattress would get taken away for the rest of the week. If I accidentally used Nate's cologne instead of my own, no showering for the next 3 days. By the time I turned 18, my idea of family was so distorted that when I saw loving parents or siblings on TV, I would get angry about how fake it was. I had spent so much of my life simply surviving that when college season finally came, I literally had a GPA of 1.0. But there was one thing I knew with all my heart. There was no way I could spend another second in my home. So when it was time to move out, I paid one of my classmates to let me sleep on the floor of their dorm room. I remember being extremely stressed when his parents came over to visit for Thanksgiving. My heart was pounding for the entire week. And I made sure to be perfect, just as my parents always taught me. So when they came and I opened the door after they knocked twice instead of once, I closed my eyes super tight to brace myself for what was to come, but instead of beating me senseless, they thanked me for opening so soon. His mom even gave me a hug. For the rest of the night, I was on my best behavior, completely silent, tense, ready to clean up anything. And when his parents left, it was over. My friend screamed at me for being a worthless piece of shut, for not being able to do anything properly. Well, the best liar is your childhood trauma. Because what actually happened was him hugging me and thanking me for being so accommodating to his parents. That's when I realized how psychotic my parents really were. And the next day, I got the phone call. It was my twin sister, Kayla. She was whispering so quietly that it could have been mistaken as the sound of an exhale. "Please help me." "I'm sorry," was all she said before immediately hanging up the phone. My heart broke, and the very next day, I drove round to the house to bring her to my friend's dorm. When we got there, she showed me her stomach and my jaw dropped. It was clear that when I left, my family needed a new punching bag, so to speak. And that was Kayla. I treated all her wounds while she apologized over and over again. But I had no resentment towards her or any of my siblings for that matter, because all my hatred was directed towards just two people, my parents. Thomas was amazing about the whole thing. He helped me set up a small space for Kayla in the corner of the room behind his desk where no one would see her during room checks. We took turns sneaking food from the cafeteria. For the first time in her life, Kayla slept through the night without fear. But our peace didn't last long. My phone started blowing up with calls from my parents the very next day. At first, they tried to sound concerned. "Neil, honey, have you seen Kayla?" "We're so worried about her," my mom said in a voicemail, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I didn't respond. The next messages got progressively angrier. "You better bring her back right now, or there will be consequences." My dad growled in his message. I blocked their numbers. Then Mason started calling. "Hey, little bro, Mom and Dad are really worried about Kayla. Just let us know she's okay, all right? No one's mad at you." I almost believed him. Almost. But I'd spent my whole life watching Mason say whatever our parents wanted him to say. This was no different. Kayla was terrified they would find her. She jumped at every noise in the hallway. She refused to go outside, even just to walk around campus. She slept curled up in a tight ball, like she was trying to protect herself, even in her dreams. "What if they call the police?" she asked me one night. "What if they say you kidnapped me?" I hadn't thought of that. Legally, Kayla was still a minor. I could get in serious trouble for taking her, but sending her back wasn't an option. I'd seen what they did to her. I couldn't let that happen again. "We'll figure it out," I promised her, though I had no idea how. The next day, Thomas pulled me aside while Kayla was in the shower. "My RA is getting suspicious about having an extra person in the room," he whispered. "We need to find somewhere else for you guys to stay." I nodded, trying not to panic. We had nowhere to go and almost no money. I'd been working part-time at the campus coffee shop, but my paycheck barely covered food for the two of us. That night, as Kayla slept fitfully on her makeshift bed, I stayed awake planning our next move. I knew one thing for certain. I would never let my parents hurt my sister again, even if it meant risking everything. I spent the next few days asking around campus for anyone with extra space. Most people just looked at me like I was crazy when I explained I needed somewhere for my sister to stay. I didn't blame them. It was a weird request. Finally, I got lucky when I ran into Melissa from my Psychology 101 class. She lived in an off-campus apartment with two roommates and mentioned they had a small storage room they weren't using. "It's not much," she warned me. "Just enough space for a twin mattress and maybe a small dresser." I nearly hugged her. "That's perfect. Seriously, thank you." We moved Kayla that weekend. Thomas helped us carry the few things we'd managed to collect. Some second-hand clothes, a cheap mattress I found on Facebook Marketplace, and a plastic storage bin for her stuff. Melissa's roommates, Alexis and Victoria, were surprisingly cool about the whole thing. They didn't ask too many questions when I explained Kayla was escaping a bad home situation. "My stepdad was a complete a-hole," Victoria told Kayla while helping her set up the tiny room. I get it. For the first time since I'd brought her to campus, Kayla seemed to relax a little. Having other girls around made her feel safer. I still slept on Thomas's floor, but I spent most of my free time at the apartment with Kayla. Things were going okay for about a week. I picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop. Kayla started doing homework for Melissa and her roommates for a little cash. We were surviving. Then Mason showed up at the coffee shop. I was in the middle of my shift when I looked up and saw him standing at the counter. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen him in almost a month. And suddenly, there he was wearing his expensive North Face jacket. And that familiar smug expression. "Hey, little brother," he said casually, like we were just two normal siblings catching up. "Can we talk?" I glanced at my manager, who nodded that I could take a break. I untied my apron and led Mason to a table in the corner as far from other customers as possible. "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering to hide my hostility. Mason sighed dramatically. "Look, I know you're mad at me. I get it, but this thing with Kayla has gone too far. Mom and Dad are freaking out." "Good," I said. "They should be freaking out. Do you have any idea what they did to her after I left?" He shifted uncomfortably. "They said she was acting out, breaking rules. You know how she can be." I stared at him, disgusted. I saw the bruises, Mason, all over her body. They hit her because she didn't tell on Cynthia for something. That's up, and you know it. They're our parents, he said, lowering his voice. They're strict. Yeah, but they love us. They just want what's best for us. I almost laughed. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? That beating your kids black and blue is love. That making them terrified of making the smallest mistake is good parenting. Mason's expression hardened. You always were the dramatic one. Always playing the victim. I'm not playing anything. I'm protecting my sister. She's a minor, Neil. This is kidnapping. Mom and Dad could press charges. There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. Tell them to go ahead. I'll show the police Kayla's bruises. I'll tell them everything. Is that what they want? For everyone to know what they've been doing to us? Mason's confident facade cracked slightly. He hadn't expected me to stand my ground. Just let me talk to her, he said, changing tactics. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I shook my head. Not happening. Tell Mom and Dad to leave us alone. We're done being their punching bags. I stood up to go back to work, but Mason grabbed my arm. They know where you work now, he said quietly. They'll find her eventually. You can't hide her forever. I pulled my arm away. Watch me. As soon as my shift ended, I raced to Melissa's apartment. I needed to warn Kayla that Mason knew I was working at the coffee shop. When I got there, I found her sitting on the couch with Cynthia. My other twin sister looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Hi, Neil. I froze in the doorway. What are you doing here? Kayla jumped in before Cynthia could answer. She came to check on me. She was worried. I looked between them, my mind racing. This couldn't be a coincidence. Mason shows up at my work, and suddenly Cynthia appears at the apartment. How did you find this place? I asked Cynthia. She looked down at her hands. I followed you one day after your class. I just wanted to make sure Kayla was okay. Something felt off. I pulled Kayla into the tiny storage room that had become her bedroom. Did you tell her where we're staying? I whispered. Kayla shook her head. No, I swear she just showed up about an hour ago. She said she misses me. I peeked back into the living room where Cynthia was texting someone on her phone. My suspicion grew. I think this is a setup, I told Kayla. Mason came to see me at work today. Now Cynthia shows up here. They're working together to find you. Kayla's eyes widened with fear. What do we do? Pack your stuff. We need to leave now. While Kayla quickly threw her few belongings into a backpack, I went back to talk to Cynthia. I sat down across from her, noticing how she angled her phone away from me. Who are you texting? I asked casually. Just a friend, she said too quickly. I nodded toward her phone. Can I see? Why don't you trust me? She tried to sound offended, but I could hear the nervousness in her voice. Not really. No. Cynthia's face fell. She knew she was caught. They're really worried about her, Neil. They just want her to come home so they can hit her again. No thanks. It's not like that, Cynthia insisted. They promised they'd be better. They feel terrible about what happened. I almost believed her. Almost. But then her phone buzzed with a new text, and I caught a glimpse of the screen. It was from our mom. Is she coming? Dad's waiting in the car. My blood ran cold. They were outside waiting. You need to leave, I told Cynthia, standing up. Now, Neil, please. Now, I rarely raised my voice, but when I did, it had an effect. Cynthia flinched and grabbed her coat. They're going to find her eventually, she said, as she headed for the door. You can't keep her hidden forever. As soon as she left, I texted Melissa to warn her not to come home yet. Then, I grabbed Kayla and the backpack with her things. We slipped out the back door of the apartment building just as I spotted my dad's car pulling up to the front entrance. We spent that night in a cheap motel on the edge of town, paid for with the last of my paycheck. Kayla cried herself to sleep while I sat by the window, watching for any sign of my parents. Why won't they just leave us alone? She asked through her tears. I didn't have a good answer. Control, maybe. Or maybe they were worried we'd tell someone what they'd done to us. Either way, I knew we couldn't keep running forever. The next morning, I called in sick to work and used the motel's crappy Wi-Fi to research our options. I found a website about teenage runaways and their legal rights. According to the site, at 16, Kayla might be able to file for emancipation, especially with evidence of abuse. But that would mean going to court, showing the bruises, telling our story to strangers. I wasn't sure Kayla was ready for that. While I was reading, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Kayla and me entering the motel last night. Underneath was a message. "We know where you are. Bring her home, or we call the police." I showed Kayla the message. Her face went pale. "They're going to take me back," she whispered. "No, they're not," I promised, though I had no idea how to keep that promise. We checked out of the motel immediately and caught a bus back toward campus. I texted Thomas, asking if we could crash in his room for just one more night while I figured things out. He agreed, but warned me his RA was getting suspicious. When we got to campus, I noticed a campus security officer talking to someone who looked suspiciously like my mother near the entrance to Thomas's dorm. I quickly steered Kayla in the opposite direction. "They're everywhere," she said, panic rising in her voice. I spotted the library ahead. "In here," I said, guiding her through the doors. We found a quiet corner on the 3rd floor where we could hide out for a few hours while Kayla pretended to read a book. I called Melissa to see if it was safe to come back to her apartment. She didn't answer. I tried Victoria next. "Hey, so weird question," Victoria said when she picked up. "But did you tell your parents where you guys were staying? Because they showed up here this morning looking for you and Kayla." My heart sank. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. Melissa told them to get lost or she'd call the cops. They left, but they seemed pretty mad." I thanked her and hung up. We couldn't go back there either. By evening, we were running out of options. I had less than $20 left, not enough for another motel. Thomas texted that his RA was doing room checks that night, so his dorm was definitely out. We ended up spending the night in a 24-hour laundromat, taking turns sleeping on the hard plastic chairs. The next morning, I woke up to find Kayla gone. My heart nearly stopped until I spotted her outside talking to someone on her phone. When she came back in, her expression was unreadable. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Cynthia," she admitted. "She wants to meet just her and me." "Absolutely not. It's a trap." Kayla sat down next to me. "What if it's not? She says she wants to help us. She feels bad about what happened. She felt bad last time, too, remember? Right before she led them straight to us. She says, Mom and Dad are at work. She just wants to talk." I could see the hope in Kayla's eyes. She wanted so badly to believe that at least one of our siblings was on our side. I couldn't blame her. I'd spent years hoping for the same thing. "Fine," I said finally, "but I'm coming with you, and we meet somewhere public." We agreed to meet Cynthia at a coffee shop on campus, not the one where I worked. I made Kayla promise to stay within my sight at all times. When we arrived, Cynthia was already there, sitting at a table by the window, alone, just like she promised. "Thank you for coming," she said, as we sat down across from her. She looked tired with dark circles under her eyes. "I'm sorry about yesterday. They made me do it." "Made you how?" I asked skeptically. "They said if I didn't help find Kayla, She trailed off, glancing at Kayla. "They'd what?" I pressed. "They'd start treating me like they treated you," she whispered. I was scared. I wanted to be angry, but I understood her fear all too well. "So why are you here now? Won't they punish you for helping us? They don't know I'm here. I told them I was going to the library." Cynthia reached into her backpack and pulled out an envelope. "I brought this for you." Inside was $300 in cash. I looked at her in surprise. "It's my birthday money," she explained. "I want you to have it to help Kayla." I didn't know what to say. After years of betrayal from my siblings, this small act of kindness felt foreign. "There's something else," Cynthia continued, lowering her voice. "They're going to report Kayla as a runaway tomorrow. They've already talked to the police." Kayla grabbed my hand under the table, squeezing it tight. "What about Neil?" she asked. "Will they say he kidnapped me?" Cynthia nodded. "That's the plan. They're telling everyone you're unstable, Neil, that you've always been troubled, and now you've manipulated Kayla into running away with you." Of course they were. They'd spent years painting me as the family troublemaker. Why stop now? "We need to get ahead of this," I said, thinking out loud. "We need to tell our side first." "How?" Kayla asked. "Who would believe us over them?" I thought about it for a moment. "We need evidence. Pictures of your injuries for starters." "I took some," Kayla said quietly. "When you first brought me to Thomas's dorm, I was scared they'd heal and no one would believe me." Smart girl. I should have thought of that myself. "What about witnesses?" Cynthia suggested. "I could tell people what I've seen." I looked at her skeptically. "Would you really do that? Go against Mom and Dad?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'm tired of being scared all the time of watching what happened to you happen to Kayla. It's not right." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we weren't completely alone in this fight. As we were leaving the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a campus alert email. The subject line made my stomach drop. Safety notice, missing student. The email described Kayla as a missing minor who might be in the company of her brother, described as potentially in need of intervention. It asked anyone with information to contact campus security immediately. They're turning the whole campus against us, I said, showing Kayla and Cynthia the email. Cynthia looked horrified. They didn't waste any time. We needed a new plan, and fast. With Kayla's face plastered all over campus, hiding was going to be nearly impossible. I thought about the legal advice website I'd read. Maybe it was time to stop running and start fighting back. We need to talk to someone official, I told Kayla. Someone who can help us navigate this legally. Like who? She asked. I remembered my psychology professor, Dr. Walter Barnes. He'd mentioned working with Child Protective Services before becoming a professor. Maybe he could point us in the right direction. I emailed him asking for an urgent meeting, being vague about the details, but emphasizing it was an emergency. To my relief, he responded within minutes, offering to meet us at his office that afternoon. I'm coming with you, Cynthia insisted when I told them the plan. I was still wary of trusting her completely, but having another witness could only help our case. We spent the next few hours hiding out in the library, jumping at every sound, convinced someone was going to recognize Kayla from the alert. At 3:00 p.m., we made our way to Dr. Barnes's office, taking back paths and keeping Kayla's hood up to avoid being spotted. When we arrived, he was waiting for us, looking concerned. "Neil," he said, ushering us inside quickly. "I saw the alert about your sister. I assume that's why you wanted to meet." I nodded, grateful he wasn't immediately calling security on us. "It's not what they're saying. We need help." Over the next hour, we told him everything. The years of abuse, the system of rewarding children for telling on each other, the beatings, the psychological torture. Kayla showed him the photos of her bruises. Cynthia confirmed our story, adding details of things she'd witnessed over the years. Dr. Barnes listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When we finished, he sat back in his chair with a heavy sigh. "What you're describing is serious child abuse," he said. "And the fact that it's been going on for so long without anyone noticing is deeply concerning." "No one noticed because we were trained not to tell," I explained. "And because they were careful about where they left marks," he nodded grimly. "I believe you and I want to help, but you need to understand that the way you've handled this, taking Kayla without any legal authority, has complicated things." "I didn't know what else to do," I said. "I couldn't leave her there." "I understand. But we need to get ahead of this narrative they're creating about you kidnapping her," he thought for a moment. "The first step is to file a formal report with CPS about the abuse. That will trigger an investigation." "Will they make Kayla go back home during the investigation?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Normally, yes. But given the photographic evidence and the severity of the allegations, we might be able to get an emergency placement for her." He looked at Cynthia for both of them, potentially. Cynthia looked surprised. "Me too. If you're willing to corroborate the abuse, then yes, you could be removed from the home as well." She bit her lip, clearly torn. "What about our other sister, Cynthia's twin?" "We can include her in the report too," Dr. Barnes assured her. For the first time in days, I felt like we might actually have a way forward, a legitimate legal way to keep my sister safe. "What about Neil?" Kayla asked. "They're saying he kidnapped me." Dr. Barnes frowned. "That's trickier. You're an adult, Neil, so you can't be placed in foster care. And technically, you did take a minor without legal authority, so I could go to jail for trying to protect my sister." The unfairness of it made my voice shake. "Not if we handle this right." He said, "The key is to be proactive. We need to file the CPS report immediately, and then you need to present yourself to the authorities voluntarily with Kayla and explain the situation." The thought of facing the police, of possibly being separated from Kayla, terrified me. But I knew he was right. We couldn't keep running. "What about our parents?" Cynthia asked quietly. "What will happen to them?" "If the allegations are substantiated, they could face criminal charges," Dr. Barnes explained. "At the very least, they'll lose custody temporarily while the case is investigated." I tried to imagine my parents facing actual consequences for what they'd done to us. It seemed impossible. They'd always been so good at presenting themselves as perfect parents to the outside world, as if reading my thoughts. Dr. Barnes added, This won't be easy. Your parents will fight back. They'll deny everything. They'll try to paint Neil as the problem. Are you all prepared for that? Kayla nodded immediately. Cynthia hesitated, then nodded too. I'm tired of being afraid, she said. I want it to stop. Dr. Barnes helped us file the CPS report that afternoon. He documented Kayla's injuries and took statements from all three of us. Then he made some calls and arranged for a CPS caseworker named Beverly to meet us at the campus police station. I'll go with you, he promised. I'll make sure they understand the situation. As we walked to the police station, I felt a strange mix of terror and relief. For years, I'd carried the secret of what happened in our house. Now, it was finally coming out into the open. Whatever happened next, at least we weren't hiding anymore. Beverly was waiting for us when we arrived. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a non-nonsense attitude. She listened to our story again, examined Kayla's photos, and took copious notes. I'm going to request an emergency removal order for both Kayla and Cynthia, she told us. And we'll send someone to check on your other sister immediately. The campus police were less sympathetic. They took my statement about why I'd taken Kayla, but I could tell they were skeptical. One officer kept referring to it as a family dispute rather than abuse. We'll need to contact your parents, he told me. Let them know we found Kayla. My heart raced at the thought of my parents showing up here, of them taking Kayla back. Please, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She has documented injuries. There's an active CPS investigation now. You can't just send her back to them. The officer looked to Beverly for confirmation. She nodded firmly. The children will be placed in emergency foster care pending the investigation. She said, I have the paperwork right here. I felt a wave of relief quickly followed by a new fear. What about me? Am I being arrested? The officer sighed. Not at this time, but don't leave town. This investigation is ongoing. As we waited for the foster care placement to be arranged, my phone buzzed with a text from Mason. Mom and Dad know you went to the police. They're on their way there now. They're furious. I showed the message to Beverly, who immediately spoke to the officers. They agreed to move us to a private room away from the front entrance. Not a moment too soon. Through the window, I saw my parents' car pull up outside the station. They stormed in, my father leading the way with that familiar look of controlled rage on his face. My mother followed, already putting on her concerned parent act. I want to see my daughters, I heard my father demand at the front desk. They've been missing for days. We've been worried sick. The officer directed them to a different room away from us. Through the wall, I could hear my mother's voice rising in pitch as she played the distraught parent role to perfection. My son has always been troubled, she was saying. He's been filling Kayla's head with lies. He's the one who should be investigated. Beverly patted my hand reassuringly. This is very common in abuse cases. The perpetrators always try to discredit the person reporting the abuse. I nodded, but her words didn't make me feel any better. My parents were so convincing. They'd had years of practice presenting themselves as perfect, while hiding what they did behind closed doors. After what felt like hours, Beverly returned with news. We found a placement for tonight, a temporary foster home that can take both girls. Kayla immediately grabbed my hand. What about Neil? Can't he come too? Beverly shook her head gently. I'm sorry, but he's an adult. The foster system is only for minors, but we need him, Kayla insisted, tears forming in her eyes. He's the only one who's ever protected us. You'll be able to see each other, Beverly assured her, just not stay in the same place. I pulled Kayla into a hug, trying to be strong for her, even as my own heart was breaking at the thought of being separated. It's okay, I told her. This is temporary. We're doing the right thing. As Beverly prepared to take the girls to their foster placement, an officer came in with news that made my blood run cold. Your parents want to press charges against Neil for kidnapping, he said. They're talking to the district attorney now. Beverly looked alarmed. That's ridiculous. He was protecting his sister from documented abuse. That's for the courts to decide, the officer said with a shrug. For now, we need to take a formal statement from Neil. As Kayla and Cynthia were led away by Beverly, I sat alone in the interview room, wondering if I was about to be arrested for the crime of trying to save my sister. After everything we'd been through, it seemed like my parents might win after all. But then I remembered the photos of Kayla's injuries, the statement Cynthia had given, the CPS investigation that was now officially underway. For the first time in our lives, people were listening to us instead of our parents. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally come out. I sat in that interview room for what felt like forever. The officer kept asking the same questions over and over like he was trying to trip me up. Did I know taking Kayla was illegal? Did I realize I could go to jail? Was I aware that my parents were concerned citizens just trying to protect their daughter from my negative influence? I wanted to scream. Finally, Dr. Barnes showed up with another guy in a suit, who introduced himself as Stephen, a lawyer from the university's legal aid clinic. He immediately told the officer I wouldn't be answering any more questions without legal representation. The cop looked annoyed, but stopped the interview. They're pushing hard for kidnapping charges, Stephen told me once we were alone. But we have a strong case for the necessity defense. You had reasonable belief your sister was in imminent danger. I nodded, too exhausted to feel much of anything. Where are Kayla and Cynthia? Are they okay? They're safe, Dr. Barnes assured me. Beverly placed them with an experienced foster family. Your parents can't get to them there. That was something at least. Stephen advised me to find somewhere to stay that wasn't on campus, since my parents knew all my usual spots. Dr. Barnes offered his guest room, which was probably breaking a dozen university policies, but I was too grateful to care. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my phone for updates from Kayla or Cynthia. Around 3:00 a.m., I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It's Mason. We need to talk alone. I almost ignored it. Mason had been my parents' loyal soldier for as long as I could remember, but something made me respond. Why should I trust you? His reply came immediately, because I'm done being their puppet. Meet me tomorrow at 10 U, the coffee shop on Elm. I showed the texts to Dr. Barnes in the morning. He thought it might be another trap, but agreed it was worth finding out what Mason wanted. He insisted on driving me there and waiting nearby just in case. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush when I arrived. Mason was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was a mess, and he was wearing the same clothes as yesterday. You look like... I said, as I sat down across from him. He almost smiled. Yeah, well, it's been a rough couple of days. I didn't waste time on small talk. What do you want, Mason? He stared into his coffee for a long moment. I saw the pictures of Kayla. What pictures? The ones she took of her injuries. The CPS worker showed them to me yesterday when they came to interview me. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. I didn't know it was that bad, Neil. I swear I wanted to believe him. Part of me even felt sorry for him, but I'd spent too many years watching him choose our parents over us. You knew, I said flatly. Maybe not the details, but you knew what they were capable of. You just didn't care as long as it wasn't happening to you. He flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not fair, isn't it? Where were you when I was getting whipped for spilling juice? Or when Kayla was being struck for not ratting out Cynthia? You were downstairs getting praised for being the perfect son. Mason's eyes filled with tears. I was a kid too, Neil. I was just trying to survive, same as you. I almost walked out right then, but something in his expression stopped me. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in my brother's eyes. Why are you here? I asked again, softer this time. He took a deep breath. They're planning to destroy you. They've already convinced half the family you're mentally unstable. They're telling everyone you manipulated Kayla into making up abuse stories. That sounded exactly like something they would do. And I'm not going to let them do it. Mason pulled out his phone. I have proof they're lying. He showed me a series of text messages between him and our parents from the past few days. Messages where they explicitly discussed their plan to discredit me and regain custody of the twins. Messages where my father talked about teaching Kayla a lesson she'll never forget once they got her back. My hands shook as I scrolled through them. Holy... Mason, I know. And there's more. He swiped to his voice memos and played a recording. It was my mother's voice, crystal clear. We just need to convince everyone Neil is crazy. No one will believe him then. We've been laying that groundwork for years anyway. I stared at him in disbelief. Why would you record this? Because I finally realized what they are. He looked down, ashamed. What they made me into. I don't want to be their weapon anymore, Neil. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was seeing the real Mason, not the perfect son my parents had molded. He looked broken and scared, just like the rest of us. Will you testify? I asked. If it comes to that, he nodded without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes to keep the twins safe, and to help you. I texted Stephen right away about Mason's evidence. He called back immediately, saying this could change everything. The texts and recording would be crucial, for both the CPS case and getting the potential kidnapping charges dropped. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. The district attorney decided not to pursue kidnapping charges against me. After reviewing Mason's evidence, CPS expanded their investigation, interviewing teachers, neighbors, and even distant relatives about our parents' behavior. Cynthia was thriving in foster care, finally free from the constant fear. She texted me daily updates about how nice her foster parents were and how she was sleeping through the night for the first time in years. Kayla was having a harder time adjusting. She kept having nightmares and panic attacks, but at least she was safe. A week after our meeting, Mason called me in a panic. "They know I gave you the texts and recording. Dad is furious. He tried to hit me, but I left before he could. I immediately told him to come to Dr. Barnes's house. When he arrived, his cheek was bruised where our father had managed to land a punch before Mason escaped. "Welcome to the club," I said, handing him an ice pack. He gave a hollow laugh. "I deserve that one. For all the times I didn't stop him from hurting you." The next day, we got word that CPS had removed our youngest sister, Cynthia's twin, from the house as well. All four of us kids were now safely away from our parents. It felt surreal. Our parents didn't go down without a fight, though. They hired an expensive lawyer who tried to paint me as the family troublemaker who had manipulated my siblings into making false accusations. They brought in relatives who testified about what wonderful parents they were, how they'd never seen any signs of abuse. But they couldn't explain away the photos of Kayla's injuries or Mason's recordings or the consistent testimony from all four of their children. The judge at the dependency hearing was a no-nonsense woman named Judge Emerson, who saw right through their act. When my mother tried her concerned parent routine, crying about how much she missed her children, the judge cut her off. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've reviewed the evidence in this case thoroughly. The injuries documented on your daughter's body are not consistent with normal discipline. They are consistent with prolonged, severe physical abuse." My mother's face hardened instantly, her tears disappearing like they'd never existed. It was the face we knew from home. Cold, angry, calculating. "These children have been given everything," she hissed. "Everything. And this is how they repay us, with lies." The judge raised an eyebrow. "I think you've just demonstrated exactly why your children are afraid of you, Mrs. Mitchell." In the end, the judge terminated their parental rights to the twins and Cynthia's twin sister. Since Mason and I were adults, we didn't need legal protection. But the judge issued a restraining order, preventing our parents from contacting any of us. It should have felt like a victory. We were free from them, finally. But I just felt hollow. 18 years of abuse doesn't disappear with one court ruling. The real work came in the months that followed. We all started therapy individually and as siblings. Kayla and Cynthia stayed in foster care, but I visited them every week. Mason got an apartment near campus and let me crash on his couch until I could afford my own place. Slowly, we started to heal, to learn what normal families were supposed to be like, to unlearn the toxic lessons our parents had taught us. It wasn't easy. We all had our setbacks. Kayla still flinched whenever someone raised their voice. Cynthia still apologized constantly for the smallest mistakes. Mason still struggled with guilt over his role in our family dynamic. And I still had nightmares about not being able to protect my siblings, but we were getting better one day at a time. 6 months after the court ruling, I got a text from Thomas, my old roommate. "Dude, you need to see this." He sent a link to a local news article. My parents had moved to a small town 3 states away. They joined a church, presenting themselves as a loving couple whose children had been stolen by the system. They'd even started the process to become foster parents themselves. But someone had recognized them from a database of parents with terminated rights. The article included their mugshots. They'd been arrested for trying to falsify their backgrounds to get access to vulnerable children. I showed the article to Mason when he came over that evening. He read it silently, then looked up at me. "They'll never change, will they?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. Number. And that was the truth. We'd broken the cycle. We'd escaped. We were building something new together. A real family based on support instead of fear, on protection instead of betrayal. Last weekend, all 5 of us siblings got together at Mason's apartment. We ordered pizza, played stupid board games, and just enjoyed being together without walking on eggshells. At one point, I looked around at my brothers and sisters laughing and arguing over Monopoly, and felt something I hadn't experienced much in my life. Peace. Kayla caught me watching them and came to sit beside me. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. I put my arm around her shoulders. Just that we're going to be okay. She leaned her head against me. Yeah, we are. It wasn't a perfect ending. We still had a lot of healing to do. But for the first time, I believed we actually had a future worth looking forward to. One where we defined ourselves, not by what our parents had done to us, but by what we chose to do for each